Good morning to everyone here, and thank you for presenting here at the committee. I suppose, as we know, the employment rate for people with disabilities in Ireland is extremely low. It's only about half that of the general population. And I would see from listening to people who have contacted my office or talking to people in DPOs, that one of the biggest problems is the attitude of employers, who tend to see the disability rather than the ability of the person. And I'm just wondering, how you make employers more aware of their obligations under the Employment Equality Act and under the UNCRPD. I mean, a person I know she's an intellectual disability. She qualified as a nurse and she went to work, and she actually was failed in her probation year, which prevented her pursuing her career because she wasn't given the understanding and support she needed. And she told me she could do everything that any other person could do, but it just took her longer. But she wasn't dealt with any empathy or support, which worries me for the people of the profession. I thought she had a lot more empathy than the people who were employing her. But it didn't destroy her confidence, but it knocked her confidence big time. And I'm just wondering, what can be done to stop that happening and to put in the support? Because many of you talked about reasonable accommodation. And I know I was a teacher before entering politics, and if a child at primary school was assessed as needing a particular type of assistive technology, that technology followed them into secondary school. It was with the child, it was not, did not stay in the school. So a lot of you have made the points that supports, the employer provides supports, but the supports don't follow the employee if they move on to a different employment. So just could that easily be addressed? I suppose, do also ask maybe the NDA around the public sector employees, the targets. I know they're to increase to 6%, but is that ambitious enough? I mean, should it not be higher than that? I suppose just to reference some of the points that are made, I think another of the barriers regarding people taking up employment, disabled people are fearful of losing their benefits, as we've already said, like free travel, like the medical card. But even for those who want to enter self-employment, so anyone with has an idea for a business and want to set up, they should have tailored supports to help them do that. But what happens is the supports, like back to work or whatever, are around a time scale, and everybody's supposed to fit into that particular time scale. Whereas a disabled person may take longer, or maybe somebody who suffers from chronic pain may take longer to actually get their business established. So they need the continuing supports, but because that's not available to them, they have to give up on the idea, which I think is very unfair. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Pauline. To Patrick.
I suppose on the individual you spoke about, that it took her longer to do it, I suppose that's where the wage subsidy scheme kicks in, which I suppose looks at productivity shortfalls because of a disability and then compensates the employer in that regard. And I think that's why I highlighted the wage subsidy scheme as being a key cornerstone to facilitating employers to employ people with disabilities. So that might be a solution in that regard. In awareness, yes, like when we go to employers, they've never heard of the wage subsidy scheme. We have to introduce them to it. We have to explain it to them, walk them through it. So the awareness out there is terrible on the various different schemes that exist. But when you explain it to employers and when you walk them through the process and look at the application forms, most of them will come on board. But there is a fear out there. There is no doubt about that you're going to employ someone and that it's not going to turn out well for you, I suppose, as an employer. But I think an awareness campaign on the wage subsidy scheme is definitely something that should be rolled out.
Okay. Patrick.
First of all, in relation to the self-employment and entrepreneurship, I think it's definitely very important that we would see it very important that disabled people would be afforded more opportunities to begin and explore self-employment. Disabled people are some of the most creative and innovative people you can meet. For many reasons, but one being obviously the different ways in which we have to adapt and navigate society and our daily lives in order to be able to live independently and to be able to live the lives we choose to lead. With regards to the situation of, you referenced, Deputy, regarding the nurse, and with regards to employers, we would see the first thing essential as disability equality training, to not disability awareness training, disability equality training. which we would see is really important in in addressing the issues around attitudes that shouldn't still prevail in society, but they do. With regards, however, to this wage subsidy scheme, we would feel that this is a very negative scheme. It focuses on, well, as I mentioned myself, what somebody can't do, deficiencies, inefficiencies. It's not inefficiency, it's a different way of working. It's different things that people do. And with regards to the employer confidence, you're in any situation, you're asking an employer whether they're a business expert, a health expert, a building expert, to suddenly be an expert in disability. And they'll never be an expert in disability unless they have either a disability themselves or lived experience of this. So we, along with wage subsidy, along with assistive technology, reasonable accommodations, we would see it as essential that these supports are provided through and to the disabled person themselves, and that they're employed and that they're empowered and they're made the experts in what they need. So there's no onus on employers to have to know what to ask or know what to provide. All they need to do is say, what do you need, what do you have, and how can we facilitate that? And if I have all the accommodations I need, if I have the medical supports I need, if I have the confidence in the supports that I'm not going to lose, if somebody wants to offer me a job, I can turn around straight away and say, that's fine, I can start this day. I just need you to be prepared to accept that I'm bringing X, Y, and Z with me, and you may need to provide one or two things in addition. But if they're already provided to me and I can already access them myself, then you don't have the issue of delays in accessing grants. You don't have the issue in delays in having to retrospectively apply for funding. So I think putting the disabled person at the centre and at the start of everything that we do will be lead to huge strides being made and being able to address a number of the issues that are being raised.
Okay, thank you very much, Patrick. Aideen?
Thank you, Chair. I will answer the question on the public sector targets, and then I'll hand over to my colleague Marion on the other questions you raised, Deputy. The minimum target as currently described in the legislation is 3%, and as I mentioned in my opening remarks, across the entire public sector, the average is 3.1% as of 2020. There are individual departments and public bodies that are considerably exceeding this target, and indeed some of them are already exceeding the revised 6% target. That target really can only be achieved through a mix of recruitment and also developing inclusive and diverse workplaces where employees feel comfortable sharing their disability status, many of whom might not have felt comfortable doing so to date. So it will be a mix of ways in which that 6% target can be achieved, and it is to be achieved by 2024, so that's only 2.5 years away now at this stage. So while there may understandably be a feeling that it's not ambitious enough, at the same time we don't want to create targets that are so daunting that people feel that they might not have any hope of reaching them. But just another way of looking at it, that other statistic I mentioned in the opening remarks, that 15,000 more people with disabilities need to be in the workforce in Ireland by 2024 if we are to achieve an overall employment rate of 38% of people with disabilities in employment. That breakdown incorporates 7,500 people in the public sector. So actually the public sector would do half of the heavy lifting on achieving that target. So I think that's probably even more than would be fair for the public sector in terms of its overall share of the Irish workforce. The legislation also does then provide for these targets to be revised and reviewed and reset by the Minister at intervals. So of course we would advise that they're regularly reviewed in line with the labour market conditions applying at the time. But I'll hand over to Marion now.
Marion?
Good morning and thank you. I wanted to address some of the questions that the Deputy brought up, and in two ways. One is around the research that the NDA has conducted on the issue of supporting people at work. And one of the important features that we have in our work is how we consult with people about what the research is telling us. So in 2020, we did a piece of work around reasonable accommodation. We not only looked at good practice, but we also looked at the cases that the Relations Commission had adjudicated on. And I suppose there's a number of really important features that are coming out of that. And one is that a large number of employers are unaware of their responsibilities around equal status legislation. And two, then, are the difficulties that some people have gone through in accessing their the accommodation that they need. And there's a couple of reasons around that. And some of them around people not knowing precisely what accommodation would work well for them in the place of work. And that can come about from returning to work after acquiring a disability. And that led us on in the NDA to produce a paper on vocational rehabilitation and the gap in the Irish system on that. And how all of those coalesce is that there is a huge gap in employer awareness. In some regards, there is some attitudinal barriers. And then, as my colleagues have spoken about this morning here, the opportunity to inform the review of the Reasonable Accommodation Fund that's taking place at the moment. I mean, some of the commentary and suggestions that the NDA have given to inform that review have been reflected in comments this morning about funding the person and who is requiring the piece of equipment, the technology, the accommodation. If it's a piece, as Aideen said, not all accommodations cost money. When we look at flexible working approaches, reduced hours, all of that sort of thing can be one solution. But the solution about supporting the individual and using some of the apparatus that's already in place that some of our colleagues spoke about, such as the IBEC ICTU Reasonable Accommodation Passport, where somebody is only looking for support once and then it travels with them. All of those things can be put in place. The NDA has made recommendations about what they would look like to make it a more seamless service and approach. But the case that you brought up, Deputy, has also come up in the NDA consultations when the Reasonable Accommodation Fund is not available to people in the public sector. And I think that is something that needs to be addressed. But that's just some of the commentary on NDA contributions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And